Intimate workers of Reddit. What is the saddest experience, client-wise, you've had while on the job? I used to visit a disabled client a while back. Kinda young guy, late 20s and wheelchair bound. I had a whole gamer thing going on because I love video games, so I'd offer to play games with clients, have some naughty penalties if you lose, that sort of thing for fun. Clients could bring their own games, or I had a list. I got a message from this guy and he wanted to play games, explained he wanted me to come over because he can't come to me, happy to pay the out-call rates and so on. So I visited, and we played some games. He wasn't really interested in the steamy extras to it, but we did do some stuff in the end. He mostly wanted to play games and talk, cuddle, etc. It continued like that each time. I'd come over, and we'd watch a movie, or play some games, then maybe do some stuff, but not always. He told me that he's lonely, and has never had any experience with girls before, and most friends he had abandoned him, because his disability got worse, and he was less active. Now the only friends he has are online and games. I saw him regularly for about a year and a half. His mother was also aware he was seeing me, and was very kind to me. She'd go out when I was there, and offer me drinks and snacks. She knew what I was, but felt like I made him happy, so it didn't bother her. One day I stopped hearing from him. He was a regular client for over a year, so I wondered what had happened. Some guys get bored and find a new girl, but in this case it seemed out of character. I went to his house just to see how he was, and his mom told me that he'd had an aneurysm and passed away a week later in hospital. It was one of the most saddest experiences of my life. He was a client, but I got to know him intimately over that time and he became like a close friend. I even got invited to his funeral and accepted. It was much less awkward than you might think. Everyone was really kind to me and non-judgmental despite hearing what I was to him. Not my story, but I knew a girl who did rent a night type of stuff. Guy asks her if she could come over. Doesn't talk about coitus over the phone. Just if she could come over, and to come hungry. She thinks he is into feeding or something like that. She arrives at like 6 PM pretty early for her work. She asks what he would like to do. He just cooks for her. A really big delicious meal later he starts to open up a bit. His wife had passed, and always loved his cooking, but he hates cooking for himself. Try not to cry. Cry a lot. I'm a former coitus worker. I booked with a middle-aged client, and we had a lovely coffee meeting before our date. I learned that his wife had passed away a couple of years ago, and he missed human contact, but wasn't ready to date anyone. So he booked in with me. Our date didn't consist of any physical contact. He just wanted to cuddle in bed with me in our PJs, and talk about his wife. He had nothing but the most beautiful things to say about her. Usually when clients talk about their wives they are complaining about everything their wives won't do, calling them a pain, etc. It's gross. He was crying, and I was crying, and he just talked about true love, and how he never thought he would find it, and how he doesn't know how to keep living, now that he's lost it. It was truly heartbreaking. I've never really dealt with much death in my life. I've certainly never seen someone grieving in that way. I didn't know how to comfort him. So I just made tea and listened to him talk for 2 hours. It was strangely beautiful to know that someone can love someone else like that. I felt so bad for him and his broken heart. When I was a kid, my mother was a dancer. As an adult, I know she did more than dancing. When I was 10, my mom told me she needed to bring my brother, 2 at the time, and I to work with her for a couple hours. It was a few days before Christmas. We drove to this super ritzy neighborhood. Gated community. My mom told me we were going to help someone and that, even though it seemed weird, she wanted me to call the man we were going to meet grandpa. When we went inside, the guy that greeted us was probably around 65 or 70. He had the most beautiful Christmas tree set up, loaded with presents. We were not super well off financially, so it was way more than I usually saw. The guy was super kind. He gave my mom a kiss on the cheek and told her he was happy to see we all had made it. My mom said, "We missed you, Dad. We are happy to be home for Christmas with you." I felt weird, but called him grandpa like my mom asked. He told us all the gifts were for my brother and I. We spent a few hours eating dinner with him and opening all the gifts while him and my mom talked. Then we went home. My mom told me on the way home that his family hasn't been around for a long time. And he just wanted to feel like he wasn't alone for Christmas. I work as a cam girl. There are a lot of sad stories, dead wives, divorces, etc. But the one that hit me was this guy. We'll call him Steve. Steve sends me a message during one of my public shows asking to go private. I go private with him after the show and he just wants to talk about my life. No nudity or anything, and in privates, his cam isn't visible to me. So I sit there talking about my life for about 2 hours at $5 a minute and he doesn't say a word. I finally run out of things to say, and he is just like, "Thanks. Can I buy your Snapchat?" Of course I say yes. I give him my Snapchat, and he signs off. The next week, I get a Snapchat from Steve asking if we can private again. I say sure, we do the same thing. He just wants me to talk about my day and random life stories for 2 hours. We do this once a week for about a month, before he asks to Skype, where I can see him. I agree. I still know literally nothing about this person. It's our scheduled time to Skype, and he doesn't pick up the call. I snap him to make sure everything is okay, and he says he's changed his mind. He wants to do our usual thing, where I can't see him. I say okay. This time, though, he types to me and I respond. Basically, he gives me his life story. He tells me that he is an independent software developer, won't say which for privacy reasons, in Switzerland. He's never had a girlfriend, and is a virgin. He's 36 years old. He has crippling social anxiety, and says he hasn't spoken to a woman face to face, not even via webcam, since he graduated from college. He says that he's hideously ugly, and felt overwhelming guilt for even looking at a woman, because he felt that it was just unwanted and offensive to her. I tried to just listen and be understanding. At the end of the conversation, he asked if he could turn on his cam and try to have a conversation with me. I agreed. He turns on his cam, and he's a totally average looking guy. A bit overweight, but a handsome face and a nice haircut, clean looking. I was shocked and just really sad that he thought so lowly of himself. I told him that he was very handsome and that he shouldn't think so lowly of himself, and we just chatted about life for a few more hours that night before saying goodbye. The next day, I get a Snapchat from Steve. He says that he felt so good about himself that he finally said hi to the front desk receptionist at work, and she said hi back and smiled. He was thrilled about this normal social interaction. We didn't video chat again, but he snapped me every time he interacted with somebody. Last I heard, he has a girlfriend. Had a client who didn't speak much English. Afterwards we were lying down together. I got out my phone, and we had a conversation via Google Translate. He told me that his wife had died 4 months earlier, and that this was the first time he'd felt normal since. Google Translate bridges gaps. It honestly can be great to have. I used to work at grocery store couple years back, cart pusher yay, and they hired this older guy who was Polish. He had just moved to the US and knew very little English. He obviously couldn't talk to anyone in our department and spent the whole day actually working. It was only thanks to Google Translate that we were able to have, admittedly broken, conversations. It helped make things less awkward and made the guy more comfortable at work. I had a guy I gave a few lap dances to. His buddy took him out because he just got divorced. His wife was the one who left him. He was crying. I tried to give him a pep talk. Most of the time I spent was holding him. I obviously wasn't helping much. A stripper doesn't even come close to replacing your wife of 20 years, especially when you've never been with anyone else. Duck. I almost cried too. Several of my male friends have told me that the worst thing after a breakup is that no one touches them. Just the physical comfort you offered probably helped that guy more than you imagine. My ex left me about 3 years ago. The breakup was unpleasant to say the least. It was horrible, but I had my cat to comfort me. I had to put her down last year. I had her for 22 years. I don't ever remember not having her. I'll put it this way, I'm so lonely and starved for affection that I had a dream where I had a girlfriend. My alarm went off and I called in sick to work so I could continue to dream about having a girlfriend. God, that sounds so pathetic typing that out. I used to be a cam worker. I had a regular client who always pay for private time with me. Nothing really did anything sensual for him. He wanted me to dress as a happy housewife and tell him what would be for dinner. How are the 2 dogs and cat, imaginary, doing? What were their names? He would tell me we lived in Italy, I forgot where, but he described to me a large house with a pool and all. He pretty much would just fantasy play house with me. I would get really into it, and he would always visit me every day. He was just a very lonely man, and seemed to crave for some human affection and interaction. I felt bad when I just dropped out of the job without warning. I do think about him from time to time. I hope he managed to live his best life.